So once you've decided that you want to read a lot of books, you then need to actually do it. I think a good thing to do is to just read one book as soon as possible. You'll probably have a load of books that you want to read. Pick one of those that you think is, reasonably easy to read, and you could probably read in, less than 8 hours. Pick that book and then just set aside 8 hours in the next week and read it. Just set aside the time to read the book. You kind of have to accept that reading a book is going to take time. So set aside that time and then just read the book. Once you know that you can read a book in a day, then it kind of makes the task of reading a whole book a lot less daunting. It's a bit like going for a run. If you've never gone for a run before, then 5k seems like a long distance. Whereas as soon as you start running, then you realise that, okay, 5k is not actually that far. And it's kind of the same thing with reading, right? Or a whole book, that takes me a month to read a whole book. But if you know that you can set aside the time and then read a book by this time next week, then it gives you a positive way of thinking about reading. You're not going to be able to read like an 800-page book in a day, probably, but you know that it's going to take you, however long it'll take you to read the book. And so you know that you should set aside this amount of time. You can sort of have ambitions for, I want to read this many books, and then think to yourself, well, I'm going to read 10 minutes a day and then see what happens. I think it's valuable to know that it's going to take however long it takes you to read the book, and then you can work out, well, if I actually want to read 3 books a month or something, I'm going to need to read more than 10 minutes a day.